Chosen ones, God said, "This is your only Job," now explores the profound moment when a human life is interrupted by divine purpose. Throughout history, individuals have risen from ordinary circumstances into extraordinary callings, not because they sought greatness, but because they were chosen. This concept of being chosen is not rooted in privilege or perfection. Rather, it is grounded in obedience, surrender, and unwavering faith. When God speaks and assigns a singular task, everything else, personal ambition, fear, comfort, and even prior identity, must fall away. What remains is responsibility. This theme highlights the weight and beauty of divine assignment. To be chosen is not merely an honor, it is a burden that demands sacrifice and resilience. The phrase, "This is your only job now," signifies total focus and commitment. It suggests that divine purpose is not meant to be balanced casually with distractions, but pursued with full devotion. In biblical narratives and spiritual experiences alike, those chosen are often isolated, tested, and misunderstood before their purpose is revealed. Yet, it is in this process that character is refined and faith is strengthened. In a modern world filled with noise, competing priorities, and constant self-definition, the idea of a single God-given assignment challenges conventional thinking. It calls individuals to listen deeply, trust completely, and act courageously. Chosen Ones invites reflection on purpose, obedience, and the cost of answering God's call. Ultimately, it emphasizes that when God chooses someone, the assignment may redefine their life, but it also positions them to impact others in ways far greater than they ever imagined. Now, let me take you through this. Divine interruption of ordinary life. Divine interruption occurs when God deliberately steps into the ordinary flow of a person's life and alters its direction for a greater purpose. It often happens without warning, in moments that seem routine or insignificant. One day, life is predictable. Work, plans, responsibilities, and personal goals fill the schedule. Then God speaks, acts, or allows a circumstance that shifts everything. This interruption is not accidental, it is intentional and purposeful, designed to realign a life with divine will. When God interrupts, comfort is challenged, and familiarity is disturbed. The individual may experience confusion, fear, or resistance because the call disrupts carefully constructed plans. Yet, this disruption is an invitation rather than a punishment. It signals that God sees beyond the present and is calling the person into something larger than their current understanding. Biblical and spiritual narratives show that God often chooses people in the middle of their ordinary lives while working, resting, or struggling, proving that divine purpose does not wait for perfect conditions. Divine interruption redefines priorities. What once seemed important begins to fade, and a new sense of urgency emerges. The interruption demands attention, obedience, and trust, even when the outcome is unclear. Ultimately, this moment marks the beginning of transformation, where an ordinary life becomes a vessel for extraordinary impact through surrender to God's direction. Assignment over ambition. Assignment over ambition emphasizes the moment when God's specific calling takes precedence over personal desires, plans, and long-held dreams. Ambition is often shaped by personal goals, societal expectations, and the pursuit of success or recognition. However, when God gives a clear assignment, it requires a shift in focus from self-directed aspirations to divinely directed purpose. This does not mean ambition is inherently wrong, but it must be surrendered and reshaped to align with God's will. God's assignment demands obedience, not convenience. It often challenges personal timelines, comfort zones, and visions of success. What once seemed urgent, career advancement, personal achievements, or public approval becomes secondary to fulfilling the task God has entrusted. This shift can feel like loss, but in reality, it is a realignment. God's assignment carries eternal value, while unchecked ambition can be temporary and self-centered. Choosing assignment over ambition requires trust. The individual must believe that God's plan is greater than personal understanding and that obedience will lead to fulfillment beyond human expectation. Over time, surrendered ambition is transformed into purpose-driven passion. The person begins to find meaning not in personal achievement, but in faithfulness to the task given. In this way, assignment over ambition produces a life marked by discipline, humility, and lasting impact. The weight of responsibility. Being chosen by God is often celebrated as a privilege, but it also carries a profound weight of responsibility. Divine selection is not merely a title or status, it is a calling that demands accountability in thought, character, and action. Those who are chosen are entrusted with a task that has spiritual significance and eternal implications, making faithfulness essential rather than optional. This responsibility requires constant alignment with God's will, not personal convenience. Spiritually, the chosen individual must maintain discipline, sensitivity, and obedience, knowing that their actions reflect the one who sent them. Emotionally, the weight can be heavy, as the calling may involve isolation, sacrifice, and moments of doubt. Chosen ones often carry burdens others do not see: interceding, leading, or standing firm in truth even when misunderstood or opposed. Morally, the responsibility demands integrity, because influence without character can damage both the assignment and those affected by it. This weight is not meant to crush but to shape. It develops maturity, humility, and dependence on God rather than self. Ignoring this responsibility leads to compromise, but embracing it leads to growth and impact. Ultimately, the weight of responsibility reminds the chosen that the calling is bigger than personal comfort. It is about stewardship, faithfulness, and obedience to God's purpose. Isolation as preparation. Isolation as preparation is a common process in the journey of those chosen by God. Often, before a calling is revealed publicly, God separates the individual from familiar environments, relationships, and routines. This season of separation is not a punishment, but a purposeful strategy for growth. Removed from noise, distractions, and external influences, the chosen individual is given space to hear God more clearly and to develop spiritual depth. In isolation, refinement takes place, character is tested, motives are examined, and dependence on God is strengthened. Without the comfort of familiar support systems, the individual learns to rely fully on God for direction, strength, and identity. This period may feel lonely, confusing, or even painful, but it serves as a training ground where resilience and obedience are built. Isolation strips away pride, impatience, and self-reliance, replacing them with humility and discipline. Isolation also protects the assignment. Premature exposure or influence can weaken or distort a calling that is not yet fully formed. By separating the chosen individual, God allows preparation to happen privately before impact occurs publicly. When the season of isolation ends, the individual emerges stronger, clearer in purpose, and better equipped to carry the responsibility of their calling. What feels like separation is, in truth, divine preparation for greater effectiveness. Obedience above understanding. Obedience above understanding is a defining principle in fulfilling a divine assignment. When God gives a task, He does not always provide full explanation or detail. The instruction may seem unclear, unreasonable, or even impossible from a human perspective. In these moments, God calls for obedience first, not complete understanding. This tests faith, trust, and willingness to surrender control. Human nature seeks clarity before action, but divine purpose often unfolds in stages. Obedience becomes the doorway to revelation. Each step taken in faith reveals the next, while hesitation or resistance can delay progress. By obeying without full understanding, the chosen individual demonstrates reliance on God's wisdom rather than personal logic. This kind of obedience requires humility and courage, especially when the assignment invites uncertainty or risk. Obedience also shapes character. It trains the heart to respond to God's voice quickly and faithfully, even when emotions or circumstances disagree. Over time, clarity follows commitment, What once seemed confusing begins to make sense as God reveals his plan through experience and growth. Ultimately, obedience above understanding produces deeper faith, spiritual maturity, and alignment with God's will, proving that trust in God's direction is more powerful than human comprehension. Sacrifice of comfort and convenience. The sacrifice of comfort and convenience is often an unavoidable part of responding to God's call. Divine assignments rarely align with ease or personal convenience, because growth and impact are formed outside familiar comfort zones. When God calls, he may require the individual to release stability, security, or routines that once provided assurance. This sacrifice can involve leaving familiar places, delaying personal plans, or choosing obedience over comfort. Comfort often promotes stagnation, while sacrifice creates space for transformation. By stepping away from what feels safe, the chosen individual learns dependence on God rather than circumstances. Societal expectations such as definitions of success, status, or approval may also need to be surrendered. God's purpose does not always fit within cultural norms, and obedience may invite misunderstanding, criticism, or isolation. Yet, these sacrifices refine focus and strengthen commitment to the assignment. Letting go of convenience teaches discipline and resilience. It shifts priorities from personal ease to divine impact. Though the process can be uncomfortable and demanding, it is never without reward. God replaces surrendered comfort with deeper purpose, spiritual strength, and lasting fulfillment. Ultimately, the sacrifice of comfort and convenience proves that God's call is not about maintaining an easy life, but about fulfilling a meaningful one that serves a greater, eternal purpose. Transformation of identity. The transformation of identity is a profound result of being chosen by God. When a divine assignment is given, it does more than change direction. It reshapes how a person sees themselves. Past labels, limitations, and self-definitions begin to lose their power as God reveals a new identity rooted in purpose rather than history. The individual is no longer defined solely by background, failures, or achievements, but by who they are becoming through obedience to God's call. This transformation is gradual and intentional. God often redefines a person internally before their purpose is expressed outwardly. Old mindsets, habits, and insecurities are confronted and replaced with faith, confidence, and spiritual authority. The chosen individual begins to think differently, value different things, and respond differently to challenges. Identity shifts from self-centered ambition to purpose-driven service. This process can be uncomfortable because it requires letting go of familiar versions of self. However, it is necessary for growth. As identity transforms, alignment with the divine assignment becomes stronger and clearer. The person no longer lives to please others or meet societal expectations, but to fulfill God's purpose. Ultimately, transformation of identity produces authenticity, clarity, and strength, enabling the chosen individual to walk confidently into the role they have been prepared to carry. Resistance and opposition. Resistance and opposition are common experiences for those chosen by God. When a person is called into a divine assignment, they often encounter doubt, criticism, or rejection from others, and sometimes even from within themselves. This resistance may come from family, friends, or society, especially when the calling challenges traditional expectations or threatens the status quo. Opposition can also arise from spiritual forces seeking to derail the assignment. These obstacles are not signs of failure but tests of faith and commitment. Opposition serves a purpose. It reveals the depth of the chosen one's dedication. When everything goes smoothly, faith can remain superficial. But when challenges arise, the chosen individual is forced to rely on God rather than human approval. Resistance strengthens character, builds perseverance, and clarifies motives. It distinguishes those who are truly committed from those who are only temporarily inspired. Even Jesus faced opposition in his mission, and many biblical figures experienced similar resistance. Their persistence in the face of adversity became proof of their calling. For the chosen, opposition is not a reason to quit, but a reason to grow. It refines faith, strengthens resolve, and prepares the individual for greater impact. Ultimately, resistance and opposition validate the significance of the assignment and deepen dependence on God's power and guidance. Singular focus and discipline. The phrase, "This is your only job now," underscores the need for singular focus and discipline when God assigns a divine purpose. Once called, the chosen individual is expected to concentrate fully on the assignment, prioritizing it above personal interests, distractions, and competing responsibilities. This level of focus requires intentionality and self-control, because divine tasks are rarely completed through casual effort or divided attention. Singular focus means eliminating distractions that steal time, energy, and emotional bandwidth. It involves setting clear priorities, creating structure, and maintaining consistency in daily actions. Discipline becomes essential because the assignment may demand long-term commitment without immediate results or recognition. The chosen one must develop spiritual discipline, regular prayer, obedience, and humility to stay aligned with God's direction. Consistency is also crucial. God's purpose is often fulfilled through repeated faithful actions rather than one-time events. Even when progress seems slow, consistent effort builds momentum and strengthens faith. Discipline keeps the chosen individual steady during trials and prevents burnout. Ultimately, singular focus and discipline transform calling into reality. It shows that God's assignments require not only passion but also perseverance. When the chosen one stays disciplined, they position themselves to fulfill the purpose with excellence and integrity, proving that dedication is a key ingredient in divine success. Impact beyond the individual. God's calling is never meant to be a private experience. When God chooses someone, the purpose extends beyond that person's life and into the lives of others. The chosen individual becomes a vessel through which God's power, wisdom, and love are demonstrated. The assignment is designed not only for personal transformation but also for community influence, spiritual awakening, and societal change. The impact of a divine calling is often seen in how it affects others, family, friends, communities, and even generations. As the chosen one walks in obedience, their life becomes a testimony of God's faithfulness. People are inspired by their courage, strengthened by their example, and encouraged by their perseverance. The influence may come through leadership, mentorship, teaching, healing, or simply living out God's truth with integrity. Furthermore, God's assignment can create a ripple effect. One act of obedience can inspire others to discover their own purpose and step into their calling. The chosen one's faithfulness can spark hope, restore vision, and ignite revival. Ultimately, the true measure of a divine calling is not personal success, but the extent to which it blesses others. God's choice is meant to produce lasting impact, shaping lives and destinies far beyond the individual who was chosen. Lastly, the journey of the chosen one is a powerful reminder that God's purpose often begins with a call that changes everything. It starts with divine interruption, an unexpected shift that redirects ordinary life toward extraordinary destiny. From that moment, personal ambition gives way to divine assignment, and the privilege of being chosen becomes a profound responsibility. Through seasons of isolation, testing, and opposition, the chosen one is refined, disciplined, and strengthened. Obedience becomes more important than understanding, and comfort is sacrificed for a greater cause. As identity transforms, the individual learns to live not for self, but for God's purpose, embracing a life marked by focus, discipline, and faithfulness. Ultimately, the calling is not about personal glory, it is about impact. God's choice is meant to extend beyond the individual, influencing, inspiring, and transforming others. In answering God's call, the chosen one discovers that their life is part of a larger story, one that echoes with eternal significance. When God says, "This is your only job now," it is an invitation to surrender, serve, and walk boldly in the purpose for which they were created.